The character of Uncle Iroh is developed quite differently from the other characters in Avatar: The Last Airbender. At the end of the series, he is the same person as he is at the start of it. This is not a negative. Not every character has to be dynamic. Most mentor characters aren't. However, it does mean the show needs to find some way to change how the audience perceives Iroh, which for simplicity's sake I am going to call his development. What they do is initially provide an image of him as this goofy uncle, then constantly complicate and undermine that image. We learn about him as Zuko does. That we see much of the show, particularly in its final 2 seasons, through Zuko's eyes, furthers our identification with him, making him feel as much like a main character as Aang. And because of this, Iroh feels as much like a mentor to us as he is to Zuko. This is the person whose ability to offer sage advice is not based on him drawing from some ethereal, mythical wisdom pool, but rather by his own personal dealing with life's vicissitudes and sorrows, and for him the sorrows are great. He is a completely different person from who he was as a young man, and much of that is because of his life's central tragedy, the death of his son, Lu Ten. When he was a younger man, he led the Fire Nation assault on the Earth Kingdom capital of Ba Sing Se. He was the Fire Nation's top general. However, when his son died and the siege stalled, Iroh decided to return to the Fire Nation in grief and disgrace. Ozai, Iroh's younger brother, took the opportunity to concoct a plan to kill Azulon, their father, and take the throne for himself. With his birthright revoked, Iroh wanders the world, gradually turning into the wise and learned mentor he is by the events of Avatar: The Last Airbender. While references to Iroh's son's death are made in Season 1, the topic is not addressed in full until Season 2. Only then is it placed into the context of how he tries to help not only his nephew, but anyone who is lost and confused. In episode 215, The Tales of Ba Sing Se, an episode that is somehow one of the funniest half hours of the entire show, and also one of the most poignant, it's implied that he has dedicated himself to helping others, at least in part because he could not help his son. After saying this, tears pour down his face. He has set up a picture of his son, and he is in the place where his son died. Today would have been his son's birthday. Then he bursts in the sorrowful song, ending the Iroh segment of this episode and giving it one of the most heart-rending moments of the entire show. As they say in musical theater, a character should sing when their emotions become so intense that they cannot speak normally. The reason this works so well in musical theater is that we can believe it. It feels natural because it is natural. Music is cathartic. It releases emotions that cannot otherwise be expressed. This is why music is a refuge for the scared and lonely, as well as a medium for the happy and hopeful to celebrate life. There is something elevated about music, and that is the idea at the heart of having Uncle Iroh sing. It's a song about a young soldier marching home, but that image, an ostensibly positive one, is undercut by the imagery preceding it. There are 2 points of note here. The first is the titular leaves falling from the vine, and the second is the shells drifting in the foam. Both of these evoke loss and the passage of time. This is not to say they are overly grim and dour, but they are wistful and melancholic. There is real emphasis placed on the shells being fragile and tiny. Against the vast, inscrutable forces that govern our lives, our own wills and passions are insignificant. That's not to say they don't matter, but the imagery here reveals human pretensions of subduing and overcoming the natural world to be nothing but fantasies. However, this is not explicit. The focal image is ostensibly optimistic. It's not hard to hear this song and not absorb the contradictions it contains, especially when it is being sung in a warm tone of voice. This is exemplified by how Iroh sings this song earlier in his segment to quiet the crying baby and help the baby's harried mother. Only at the segment's end does the latent sorrow of this song surface. This versatility is common in folk songs. Many of these have dark themes, but these are contrasted with lighter lyrics that draw heavily upon natural imagery. And this, combined with a soft, drawling melody, makes the darker lyrics easy to overlook. This does not necessarily mean Leaves from the Vine is a folk song, but it would make sense. The show never depicts Iroh writing songs, but he seems to know a significant amount of songs nonetheless. In episode 118, The Waterbending Master, he hosts a music night on his ship and sings a piece with the lyrics, "Four seasons, four loves." The piece is later transformed into a romantic motif for Sokka and Yue's relationship. Additionally, when Zuko and Iroh are forced to escape after being made fugitives of the Fire Nation, Iroh begs for money by singing a song about the girls of Ba Sing Se. These three songs likely represent only a small fragment of the folk songs in Iroh's repertoire. Where he learned all these folk songs is debatable. It's never made explicit, though the most sensible possibility is that he learned them from different places and musicians while traveling the world following his son's tragic death. One can only imagine how he reacted upon hearing Leaves from the Vine for the first time. He probably hated it because it brought back all those raw emotions, but later grew to care for it because it connected him to the millions of others who have suffered that same sort of loss. The world of Avatar: The Last Airbender has some of the most lusciously beautiful scenery of any fantasy world, but those aesthetic marvels are undercut by how no one in this world, with the exception of a privileged few, like Azula and arguably Ozai, is whole. Aside from Aang, who is frozen in an iceberg for 100 years, and supernaturally ancient folk like Guru Patik, no one in this world has known peace. Millions have lost brothers, cousins, fathers, and yes, sons. There are few experiences more unnatural and gutting than having to bury one's own child. When it does occur, it's supposed to be an aberration, some stroke of abject misfortune. However, war makes it a common experience, which Avatar portrays acutely. Commiseration over it can unite people, which is both heartfelt and deeply sad. That it is an ever-present possibility leads to its inclusion in songs like Leaves from the Vine. It's entirely possible the song was created before the 100-Year War, but I think it's an unlikely possibility. There were wars before the 100-Year War in this world, of course, but it is possible that there has never before been a war this long and that affected this wide of an area. It's not the only song that seems inspired by this conflict. The song about the girls of Ba Sing Se has always seemed to me like a song made up by the flood of refugees who had to flee their homes and go to Ba Sing Se because of the Fire Nation. I have no evidence to back up this theory, so you are free to disbelieve me if you want. But I don't know of any other event so fundamentally disorienting on a societal level that it would inspire the mass movement of refugees to Ba Sing Se that would provide the climate for a song like this to be written and performed. But back to Leaves from the Vine, whatever value it possesses as a song is dwarfed by the value of those words coming from Iroh's lips. He's not a particularly great singer, but that is a good thing. It is a weary and ragged song that demands a weary and ragged voice. If it was sung by the rich, dulcet tones of Josh Groban, it would lose all emotional impact. Iroh sings it as you or I would. His voice is clogged with tears as the memory of his son's death overwhelms him. How is he supposed to sing the line, "Brave soldier boy comes marching home," when his own son didn't make it back from the war? On the other hand, how is he not supposed to sing it? What else is there for him to do? How else is he supposed to contend with these emotions that threaten to drown him? As Iroh sings, he is beneath a tree on an idyllic hilltop. It is a gorgeous day. The evening light is poetic. However, contrasting against all of this is the knowledge that this is where his son perished. This area used to be a wild battlefield. That contrast between explicit natural beauty and the implicit but innate sorrow of living during a time of war and loss is reflected by this song. Because of Iroh's creaking, pain-stricken voice, the despondency beneath the melody reveals itself. It is not explicitly a song about a boy dying in combat, The line about the soldier coming marching home is ironic to Iroh, but it is not innately ironic. However, the subtly dark imagery makes it apparent that even if the boy makes it home from war this time, there may come a day in which he doesn't. Time marches on, the vicissitudes of life unspool, and their threads catch and claim the lives of many. While the leaves may fall slowly, they do fall. While the fragile shells may only drift in the foam, they will eventually be carried to a place far from their origin point. Death claims everyone. Those who don't die in battle, like Iroh himself, will eventually die as old men and women, hopefully surrounded by the people who care most about them. Far more perish because of a stray bullet, or a trap, or a miscommunication, or any number of things. Though we accept death as real, we normally view it from a distance, as though it was lingering just over the far horizon. But war makes death visceral and close. As the French philosopher Simone Weil declares in her essay The Iliad, or the Poem of Force, the soldier cannot avoid the presence of death. And the force of war is such that the soldier rarely possesses the clear mind to consider extricating themselves from the war, which crushes them into something more object than human. For other men, she writes, death appears as a limit set on advance of the future. For the soldier, death is the future his profession assigns him. The power of Leaves from the Vine comes from how it is both deeply personal and chillingly universal. While the world of Avatar: The Last Airbender is a world of compassion, empathy, and redemption, it's also a world of loss and sorrow, a world in which characters cannot contrive plans to avoid falling into that sorrow, for it has already claimed them. So they instead wonder how to cope with it. Even those who have not lost absolutely everything live with the terrifying possibility that one day they will. There are precious few characters in this world who would not form an emotional connection with Leaves from the Vine if they heard it. The tension and tenuous hope implicit in it make it a great song for smiling through tears, for pretending that everything is alright when your heart and brain cry out with the truth that it is not. Iroh at first glance seems removed from the agony and tumult that grips the souls of others, but Leaves from the Vine reveals that to be a facade, and that facade crumbles. While he may be better than those he helps at making meaning from his suffering, that does not diminish the depth of his suffering. It doesn't stop that suffering from consuming him. As he sings, it is with the voice of a million parents mourning the loss of their sons and daughters. However, he also sings with his own voice, the voice of a prince who had everything given to him, until suddenly he was subject to the abrupt vicissitudes of life and everything was taken from him. It is the voice of a mentor who emerged from grief and emotional devastation to help his nephew craft his own identity and really figure out who he is. It's the voice of a fallible man who's not as immune to the suffering of the world as a casual acquaintance might believe. So thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more content like this. Keep watching Avatar. It is a fantastic show with a vast, nuanced world and heartbreaking characters. Tune in soon for the next Avatar Explained video. It's sure to be coming soon. I promise you that. Thank y'all again. Adios, comrades.